a very happy 77th Independence Day to all our viewers from News 9. Today, in his address from the ramparts of the Red Fort, Prime Minister Narendra Modi battled for peace in Manipur and said that the centre and state are working together for peace in the state. Prime Minister added that there is peace and they would continue to strive to get every community back. Prime Minister also spoke about the issue of corruption, he spoke about pushing out reforms, he spoke about welfare measures, he spoke about creation of new middle class majority in this country, he spoke about national security, he spoke about Parivar Jan against Parivarvad, he spoke about the 10 years that he has given, he spoke about progress, he spoke about Bhrashtachar, he spoke about Tushtikaran. But Prime Minister also said that he will be back next year. Mr. Vempati, first to you. Prime Minister spoke on multiple issues. He spoke on, he coined a new word, Parivar Jan against Parivarvad. He has spoken on national security. He spoke on the politics of Tushtikaran. He spoke on the creation of a new middle class. He spoke on the issue of welfare schemes. But to you, this was, what's the biggest takeaway, as it was his 10th address from the ramparts of the Red Fort, exactly months away from the general elections?
Thank you, Kartikeya. I think, first of all, a very happy Independence Day to all of you and to your viewers. I think, as you rightly pointed out, this was the 10th address of the Prime Minister from Red Fort, and it comes at a very significant moment in modern India's, independent India's journey. It is the end of what was called the Azadi Ka Amrit Mahotsav, which was to mark 75 years of independence. It is the beginning of the period that he has been repeatedly calling as the Amrit Kal, the next 25 years or the next 2 decades before independent India becomes 100 in 2047. It is also a few weeks away from the all-important G20 summit, where India holds the presidency, and you will have a whole host of global leaders visiting Delhi at a time when India is playing a crucial role in several areas of geopolitics. So to me, this speech was a speech that was meant to carry this significant moment, bring its significance to every citizen, and to lay out a roadmap for what is going to happen over the next 5 years, next 10 years, 20 years. And I think he did exactly that. The key takeaway for me was the energy with which he delivered the speech. I think it was very, very palpable that there was a lot of high energy motivation that went into the speech. And he was very forthright in some of the issues that otherwise prime ministers would have spoken subtly, or they would have been a little more ambivalent. I think he was very clear on what he was speaking. He was very clear on what he was hinting at, and he was very clear with the key message that you formed this government, you allowed me to reform, I performed, now it is the time to transform, and that is the key takeaway.
Mr. Vempati, I wouldn't use the word Nehruvian, but there is a similarity, because Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, from the ramparts of the Red Fort, and I was thinking about it today morning, when he spoke on various issues, it was like a distinct break from the colonial past. Prime Minister Modi, and in between, when the other prime ministers came, they focused on a lot of continuity. But Prime Minister Modi, again, he formulated his politics from a distinct break from the past. His politics was premised on anti-corruption. His politics was premised on governance, custodian of national security. Nehru was premised on, to break the shackles of colonial past. So this breaking away of the past, don't you think, is the most defining part of the Prime Minister Modi? When he speaks, it's more about like breaking away from the past, which is very, very distinct from other prime ministers.
Absolutely. I think this breaking away from the past was apparent in every one of his Independence Day speeches. In fact, when I was at Prasar Bharati, one of the things that we had done was to digitize all of the Independence Day speeches of all of the prime ministers. And looking at some of the speeches of the past, you would see that most of the time the Independence Day speech would end up being sort of a long rambling speech on the various schemes and talking about all the various government initiatives. What this Prime Minister has done is a very clear break in terms of having a conversation with this country on difficult issues. For example, when he, a few years back, he spoke about sanitation, toilets. He spoke about, the safety of the girl child, asking families to ask the sons, difficult questions on, where did you go, what did you do, right? So difficult conversations have been a part of the Independence Day speech. And if you look at the format of the Independence Day speech from Red Fort, right, it was not an easy speech to deliver because you have, first of all, Delhi in August, very hot and humid. You have, you don't have the same kind of eye contact with the audience because you're delivering it from a distance. You don't necessarily get the same kind of crowd response as you would get in a closed room or in a political rally, right? Because of the format of the speech. So to be able to use this platform and deliver a rousing speech which really engages with every citizen in every part of India, and to have these difficult conversations on subjects that otherwise were not put out in the public domain, I think is very unique about this Prime Minister. So definitely in that sense, it is a break from the past.
I think detailing also लोग भूल जाते हैं 10 साल हो गए इस बात को, बुलेट प्रूफ कॉरिडोर की विदाई भी हुई थी और भारतीय प्रतीक साफों की अगुवाई भी हो गई थी 2014 में.
बिल्कुल, I think that is a significant change, that you get a clear view perspective of the Prime Minister. ये जो बुलेट प्रूफ का जो पोर्टल था वो पूरा हट गया. And also you will see that the speeches are much longer. I was looking at some stats earlier today on the average length of the Independence Day speech. I think Prime Minister Modi's speeches are among the longest, perhaps almost as long as speeches that Mrs. Gandhi would deliver, while all of the other Prime Ministers delivered fairly shorter speeches. So in that sense, there's a significant change there as well. And also the manner in which this entire Independence Day event, the build up to it with the various campaigns, for example, liberalizing the flag code and popularizing Har Ghar Tiranga, I think is a significant break from the past. Now you made everyone a participant in this pageantry. It is not just the Prime Minister delivering remarks from a distance, but now every citizen has become part of this movement around this build up towards independence.
No, you're perfectly, you're right, I agree. If you look at the photographs, of our independence, early days 50s, वो जन महोत्सव होता था. Gradually 60s and 70s it turned into a sarkari function. I think what he imparted was a public participation. But I think that defines Prime Minister Modi. Swachh Bharat campaign, you don't need to sacrifice your entire life to be part of it. It's like very Gandhian in one way. You can do a little bit. It's like I was reading one of the articles, and Gandhi argued you don't need to be a satyagrahi to, you don't need to go to jail to be a satyagrahi. You just need to do one little thing. So I think to do one little thing, Har Ghar Tiranga, yeah, Swachh Bharat, I think that defines Prime Minister, public participation in cherishing movements of importance or creating impetus for government scheme. I think that characterizes him, and all that comes together every year on 15th of August, sir.
Absolutely. In fact, if you look at his slogan now, it's not just Sabka Saath, Sabka Vikas, it is also Sabka Prayas, which is, highlighting or underscoring this whole creed of involving the people, making them participants in the process. And it goes back to his early days as a community organizer in his early days at Disang, where if you look at some of his work, in the 80s and 90s, almost every one of them has this common theme where he finds innovative ways of involving people, be it Vaishnav Jan, coming up with different ways of rendering Vaishnav Jan, be it, take the example of the Statue of Unity, right, where you had, every village in India contributing iron, which went into the construction of the Statue of Unity in Kevadia. So this is a very common repeating, theme of how to make everyone a participant, an equal stakeholder in these transformative initiatives.
Prime Minister in public persona is like custodian of national security. The last Prime Minister who could successfully did it was Indira Gandhi. After that, no Prime Minister could ever claim that he is the custodian. When I mean custodian, काम करने दीजिए उनको, he'll take care of it. Your comments.
Yeah, let me first react to what you were discussing just a couple of minutes back on, the detailing and how he has been emphasizing the girl child. And if you look at, his speeches over the years, this is a very consistent theme, because if you look at his politics has been a very different kind of politics. It's a break from the past. It is not rooted in, traditional identities. And to be able to do that, to be able to deliver that message, he has consistently looked to carve out a very niche constituency for himself, which is, the new middle class, the women, the girl child. So you see this consistent emphasis where he's able to appeal to them directly, so that they are able to be that swing vote, which delivers him and empowers him to pursue this reform-oriented developmental agenda. So this is a very consistent theme across the years. Coming back to your question on national security.
No, you are right. I don't disagree with you, sir. Appointment of Nirmala as a defense minister was path-breaking. Indira ji ke time mein tha jab unhone wo portfolio rakha tha, if my memory serves me right, for some time. Again, it went back to a person, man. And लोगों को बड़ा लगता है कि ठीक है.
Representation of women in the cabinet in both the terms has been
लोगों को
phenomenal.
लगता है कि अब बड़ा सामान्य बात है. You have a finance minister as a woman for so many years. Just recall 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000. Finance ministry, defense ministry, home ministry. You have a woman there.
Absolutely. Your speaker, president, you had his successor in Gujarat, a woman chief minister. So it's a very big part of his developmental approach is, and in fact he shared this some time back in a conversation. That in his first campaign in Ahmedabad, at the municipal corporation, he was able to turn the entire landscape in favor by engaging with housewives, going and meeting them in the afternoons and mobilizing them for the campaign. So this is something that is very deeply ingrained in his approach to democratic politics. Now, coming back to national security, I think I would disagree with you on one point there, that I would say even Prime Minister Vajpayee, because if you look at his term, right, you had Pokhran, you had Kargil, you had some very significant moments of national security, the sanctions on India and so on. So apart from Prime Minister Modi and Mrs. Gandhi, I would say even Mr. Vajpayee was also a Prime Minister who came across as the custodian of national security. What is different with this Prime Minister, very clearly, and I think Rakesh alluded to it some time back, was he has spoken about India's place in the global order, in the overall geopolitics that is emerging. And for the first time, because if I recall, almost every Independence Day speech of the past would be where you would talk about the neighbors, you would talk about hostility, you would talk about hostile environment, and so on and so forth. There is one speech where the neighborhood was completely set aside, because India has its sights much further ahead by looking at India's place in the emerging global order, the geopolitical scenario that is rapidly changing. And he set the goals very clearly, that the third biggest economy in the world and a developed India by 2047. So in that sense, from a national security standpoint, it is about India's strategic interests from an entire global context, and not just the subcontinent and the neighborhood context, which used to be the dominant theme for most of the Independence Day speech.
He'll talk about Global South. We are hosting G20. We'll talk about Ukraine. We'll talk about chips, semiconductors, our place there. We'll talk about emerging technologies in context of Green India. We have set such ambitious targets for hydrogen, Green India. We are one country which has 40% of production of renewable energy. Mr. Vempati, and then I'll come to you, Rakesh ji.
Yeah. Very subtly he hinted at China as well, without naming China, right? Because he talked about the post-COVID situation and the recovery, and it's very clear that it is only India that has recovered so well, and the Indian economy that is growing. And look at what has happened to China with the zero COVID and all of the economic bad news that is coming across. So clearly, India's place in the world, India is the voice of the global South, and the aspirations of being a global economic heavyweight and a fully developed nation by 2047. I think that is the direction that he has set, and that is the basis on which he is confidently seeking this mandate. And earlier Rakesh had mentioned that he probably shouldn't have alluded to dynastic politics and so on. No, I don't think so. I think it was very apt for the reason that in his mind, this is a crucial moment for Indian democracy, and India cannot afford to make the mistake of the wrong choice come general elections next year. And I think that is the reason why so much of the speech was dedicated to make sure that what is the narrative with which he wants the voters to look at the choice of 2024. And it's so important because it is not just about his party, it's not just about his premiership, but it is about India's future, India's growth story, India's development over the next 2 decades.
I was reserving the best for the last, like deserts. You're absolutely right.